All right. Hello, everyone. This is Steve Lewis again, and I'm here with our intern, Izzy. And we're joined today by Mahanth Joishy, who is a head of fleet for Madison. And we're going to talk about the sustainability initiatives that the city is going forward with, and particularly the recently announced news about the fire truck. So welcome, Mahanth.
Thank you, Steve and Izzy, for hosting.
Mahanth, I know you're somewhat new to Madison, only been here a few years. You came from New York, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I moved here in 2017. So the end of this month, it'll be 4 years. And I was working in New York City government for about 16 years before that.
Ah, okay. What brought you to Madison?
So this job brought me to Madison. So I saw the posting, and I've been to Madison several times because I have a cousin who lives here and has been here for a while. My first time here was in 2012. I came here for my cousin's wedding. I was the best man at the wedding, and it was
Very cool.
Madison Zoo. It was a lot of fun. A bunch of my relatives and friends were in town for that wedding, and we all had a really good time. And that was kind of my introduction to Madison. And ever since back then in 2012, it was at the back of my mind if I left New York City one day in the future that Madison was one of the plan Bs I had in mind. And it kind of came to fruition a bit randomly. So my predecessor, his name was Bill Vandenbroek. He was here in city government for 38 years. So he started before I was actually born. And then he was the superintendent for 26 years. So he had just retired in this kind of the spring of 2017. So this position opened up, and I applied to it kind of on a whim, and things moved forward quickly. And I ended up getting the offer and deciding to move here.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. So the news came out just a couple of weeks ago that we have one of the most advanced fire trucks in the nation. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So Madison is running the only operational electric fire truck in North America at the moment. And it's posted here at Station 8. And the truck has been manufactured by Pierce Manufacturing. They're a Wisconsin company. They're based up in Appleton, with Oshkosh being the parent company. And Oshkosh and Pierce have a long relationship with the City of Madison Fire Department that goes back decades. All of our fire trucks are made by Pierce. And a few years ago, Pierce started developing an electric drive technology that's quite advanced. And they had Madison in mind as the first destination for the prototype, what we're operating here. And what our fire department is doing is putting it through the test of going to real calls and real emergencies. It's been in service since May 21st, and it was unveiled in the first week of June. We had an event at Station 8 that involved Governor Tony Evers and Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, as well as the CEO of Pierce Manufacturing, Joe Johnson, myself, and a number of other folks, the chief of the fire department, Steve Davis. The fire department has really taken the lead in working with the Pierce Manufacturing Company to put together the specifications of this truck to make sure the duty cycles would work for what we do at Station 8, which is the busiest of all of the fire stations in Madison. And it's been on the job, like I said, since May 21st, working quite well. We're obviously saving a lot of CO2 emissions by operating this truck. And it's great to be in, to drive, to operate out of. Our firefighters right now are putting it through the test. And it's on an indefinite loan to the City of Madison. It's at no cost to us as they test out the prototype.
Okay, that's awesome. Have you gotten feedback from firemen about how it compares or intricacies?
We're collecting data on this truck as it operates, and one of the important feedbacks we're receiving is that it works well. It's quieter, it's spacious, it's got a lot of room, and it does the job, which is the most important thing. As we try to make our fleet more sustainable, with various things we're doing, one of them is electrifying the fleet. We have 60 electric vehicles in the City of Madison now. for various departments. The most important thing we think about as fleet managers is, will this work for the using department? So it has to work for the fire department for it to be effective and for us to hopefully continue growing the electric fleet. And if we buy a truck such as this one or various other kinds of vehicles such as sedans or off-road vehicles that are electric or forklifts that are electric, all of these things we're operating, they have to work for the operation as well as have the environmental sustainability impacts that they do.
Yeah, I can imagine for many fleet vehicles, if they work 97% of the time, then that's fine. You know, the 3%, you just make other arrangements. But with a fire truck, that's not really the case. You need 100%.
Yeah, we really need it to work and to be effective, and for the folks that use the truck to be able to do what they do, including in life safety kind of environments. And so we do have a whole fleet of fire trucks, and we try to keep them in service as much as possible. We do have to do repairs on them. We try to do that as quickly as possible. We work closely with Pierce Manufacturing on that, as well as Reliant Fire Apparatus, which is the dealership that the city of Madison uses. And overall, it's a good fleet, and it's a fleet that's made in Wisconsin. So it also, we support the local Wisconsin economy with a lot of what we buy. And I mentioned that Pierce is a Wisconsin company. I'm a strong believer that Wisconsin can lead the entire world when it comes to environmental sustainability of the fleet. And Madison can be at the forefront of this real revolution that's going on in transportation. You're going to see in the next few years more change in the transportation industry than we've had in 50 plus years. Electric is just one of the things that we're seeing. You're also seeing biofuels. So we're a large purchaser of biodiesel. We're one of the largest around. And all of the biodiesel we use comes from Wisconsin feedstocks. That's the source material that goes into making biodiesel. And all of that is synthesized right here in Wisconsin at a plant in DeForest that's run by the Renewable Energy Group. So with the fuel that we're buying, it's much more environmentally sustainable, and it's also transported locally to get to us, right? So a lot of things go into making gasoline or diesel and getting it to be available for all of us to use, from the gas stations, or in the city's case, we run our own fuel station for all of our fleet needs. And by getting biodiesel into our fleet, it's a much cleaner fleet. We're estimating we've saved over 5.5 million pounds of carbon dioxide in the last few years by using biodiesel and by electrifying our fleet and by buying a number of hybrid electric vehicles. You'll notice most of the police cars on the road now are hybrids. They get a much better gasoline mileage for everything that they need to do, whether it's fighting crime or investigating things, whatever the police department needs to do with these vehicles. And every city department actually is quite dependent on the vehicles and equipment that we purchase and maintain on their behalf. So if you think about the streets department that does garbage collection on the streets that we all live in, the recycling collection, the leaf collection, the snow plowing and salting of our roads in the wintertime, those are equipment heavy operations. Those trucks are extremely important. And the construction equipment that we have out on the road, very important. Traffic engineering equipment, trucks and other kinds of vehicles are important to making sure our roadways are clear and our signs go up and our traffic lights are maintained, et cetera. All of these are equipment heavy operations. And my division is a support agency for other city divisions. So we're an internal service agency. A lot of times the public doesn't know much about what we do, but we're trying to get the word out there, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience about this.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned a very large transformation coming. As you look out, say, over 5 years or 10 years, how do you see that transformation for the city happening, and then for other similar cities? I know some people talk about biofuel as maybe a transition towards full electrification longer in the future. Do you believe that too? What do you see?
So what you're going to see is in the next few years, we're going to see electric vehicle batteries getting better and better. So what that means is on a single charge, you can go further with it. the price of battery technology is coming down. So what you see on the market right now is electric vehicles that are somewhat more expensive than the equivalent gasoline vehicle. So for example, we're buying Tesla for the police department, and there's a bit of a premium on buying a Tesla over buying other kinds of police vehicles that run on gasoline. What a lot of folks don't know is that electric vehicles such as Teslas and Chevrolet Bolts and the Nissan Leafs that we've been operating, they cost much less to maintain. There's a lot fewer moving parts in an electric vehicle. You have a motor that's tied to the battery system. This includes the fire truck we're talking about. There's a lot less components that need to be replaced because they get worn out. You don't have to do oil changes, which is a big part of what my division's mechanics do. They do a lot of oil changes on vehicles, which has its own environmental impact when you have to buy engine oil and dispose of waste engine oil when you change out the oil. And so electric vehicles cost less to maintain, obviously cost a lot less to power up. So I'm estimating around a quarter of the cost of gasoline or diesel to power up with electricity for electric vehicles. Another revolution that's happening is the solarization, you could say, of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So we have a number of solar charging stations here in our headquarters building that can simultaneously charge up 6 electric vehicles at the same time on pure solar power without having to be part of the grid. The benefit of that is our grid still has fossil fuel sourcing in it here in Madison and most of Wisconsin. And that might be coal, it might be other fossil fuels that help power our grid. So by increasing the amount of solar power that we use, not just for electric vehicle charging, but for other operations in our garages, in our homes and our office buildings, you're displacing some of that carbon dioxide output upstream that you need for to source for your power grid. So there's facilities that are moving in that direction towards renewable, whether that's wind energy, solar energy, and there's also the vehicles themselves that are running on biodiesel or electricity. And both of those are advancing rapidly as we speak. And I think it's a very exciting time to be in the transportation field for that reason. And I'm really proud that Madison's a community that's receptive to it. And we have a lot of partners. I mentioned the agencies that we support. There's also the mayor's office, which Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway just very recently announced the climate forward plan for Madison. That includes the fleet going in the direction that we're talking about, but also the facilities and also for our residential population, the residents of Madison, to go in this direction. And something else that I'm involved in is we're forming a working group around electric vehicle adoption for everybody, right? So the reason why we buy electric vehicles isn't just to clean up our own operations. It's really to set an example to the rest of the city. We have a population of over 250,000 people. My vision is that everyone is going to be on public transport or electric vehicles or public transport that's electric as well. Metro Department is investing in electric buses, and those will be rolling out quite soon. And a lot of folks on this call, if you take buses to get around, to get to work or for your kids to get to school, that kind of thing, hopefully those will be electric as well in the near future and increasing as we go along. And all of these technologies are new. I mentioned the fire truck is the first one in operation. There's a lot of companies working on this and electrifying, but it's a difficult thing to do. And we're just at the very cutting edge, the very beginning of this revolution that I'm talking about. So we've set the goal here at Fleet for our division. We run about 1,400 vehicles for the city of Madison. I mentioned the police cars. There's also ambulances. There's the streets equipment I mentioned, the fire trucks, and then various kinds of sedans that our administrative folks use, such as myself or Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway, whose office has an electric vehicle assigned to them, the Chevrolet Bolt. For city needs, we cover most of what we need for light duty vehicles with electric at this point. And we're hoping that you get into the medium duty type of stuff like the pickup trucks and the van and the SUVs and that kind of thing. And also the heavy duty. We're trying to buy electric garbage trucks at this point, the first few that the city would has ever had. And I'm hoping by the end of this year that we'll have a couple of those. And we're talking to a number of companies in Canada and the United States about trying to source all electric garbage trucks as well. Those would be the next kind of frontier for us, and difficult things to electrify as you get into larger vehicles.
So talking about difficulties, I know a few years ago, Madison Metro did a sort of pilot run with some electric buses, and there was some difficulty with that. Can you talk about what the primary difficulties are in this transition? What maybe you're still struggling with now?
Yep. So I mentioned upfront costs for electric. So electric trucks, buses, cars, et cetera. All of them are a higher price point than the equivalent gasoline vehicle at this point. And the savings you would see would be in future years if you operate the vehicle for 10 years or more than 10 years. You'll see the savings down the road. But upfront, the city and other organizations need to make an investment in the vehicles and charging infrastructure before you'll see that return on investment over time. And this makes it difficult for a lot of organizations who might not have the funds. And a lot of us are in a budget crunch right now related to the year that we just had, that we all went through with the pandemic and with other kinds of economic factors that have potentially reduced the tax base and revenue base. For example, city services generated less revenue because of the pandemic as folks work from home and didn't necessarily use public transit or the parking ramps, didn't necessarily go downtown for lunch at a restaurant that would generate, tax revenue and profits for businesses. So we're in a tough environment right now economically, and you have to make the argument that this investment is still worthwhile. That's something I'm working on and doing analysis around these investments. That is an ongoing challenge, not just for us, but at the federal level, state level, local government level, private sector level, nonprofits. You talk about, the University of Wisconsin has a fleet operation, for example. Dane County does as well, and various state agencies, not including all the private companies that operate trucking and fleets throughout Wisconsin. So we're all, a lot of us are trying to do what I'm doing. I think we're ahead of the curve here in Madison. We are, pretty much on a national level, we're ahead of the curve. And I'd like to maintain that leadership. And as I mentioned, not just for other fleets to follow our lead and our model, but for the public. And a lot of our efforts, I think, need to be put into how can the public jump onto this revolution that we're talking about? I think it's inevitable, partly because the costs will come down. So in the next few years, I think you'll see parity between an electric vehicle and the equivalent gasoline vehicle upfront. So at the time you go to the dealership and buy it, it will cost the same and potentially less than the equivalent gasoline vehicle. That's when you'll see the tipping point. A lot of people think that'll be 2022, 2023, when we start seeing the beginning of that tipping point. At that point, the ICE engine or the internal combustion engine is in a lot of trouble, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of experts in this area. And the companies such as Ford, GM, and Chrysler, if they don't rapidly ramp up their electric efforts, they are either going to go out of business or they're going to limp out into the sunset by the end of this decade. And I think they realize it, and they're putting a lot of resources into alternative energy. GM's coming out with the Hummer that's all electric, for example. Ford has a Mustang, which you can buy here locally in Madison. It's called the Mach-E. We had test drives of this stuff here at our headquarters at our ribbon cutting that was on June 22nd. You could test drive a Tesla or a Mach-E or some electric motorcycles that are really cool, including the Harley-Davidson Livewire, another Wisconsin product. Harley-Davidson's a global icon in motorcycle manufacturing, and they are heavily investing in electric as well. So it's not just the type of things we have in our fleet, but other things electrifying as well. And we're looking forward to seeing more and more models available and the prices coming down, and that they will do the job that we need for our mission as a city. We can't compromise on fighting crime or fighting fires or picking up the garbage, right, to keep the city clean. But I think you're going to see the quality will be there, the maintenance costs and fuel costs will be there. We can make that argument already. In a few years from now, I think we're going to be sitting at a point where every fleet can do what we're doing here. And in the meanwhile, we're trying to get the ball rolling a little faster here and trying to encourage the private sector to build this stuff. and say, if you build this better mousetrap, the world will be a pathway to your door. Madison will be in front of the line to get all this vehicles and equipment. And then come biodiesel and why I'm a big proponent of biodiesel. I mentioned that this is a Midwestern product, typically made out of soybeans and other kinds of agricultural products that come from different parts of the state to synthesize into biodiesel. We are not going to electrify our trucks, anytime soon. We're trying to get a few a year in our plans. It's going to be 2030 to 2035 before we'll have widely available electric trucks for all of our needs. We also have a large amount of infrastructure work we have to do for the charging stations for all of these vehicles. That's going to take some time. And it's another one of the challenges. You might not have a building that's outfitted for these heavy duty chargers that we need. So in the meanwhile, I think biodiesel is the bridge as a cleaner fuel than regular diesel and sourced locally. And we're working really closely with the Renewable Energy Group. That's where all of our biodiesel comes from here in Madison to upfit technology onto our existing trucks to be able to accept 100% biodiesel, also known as B100. So right now we can only accept up to B20 or 20% biodiesel in our trucking fleet. And that's in the warmer months. And in the colder months, we have to go down to 5% biodiesel. And this is because of the properties of biodiesel. They have a higher freezing point in the winter time that can cause problems for the trucks and equipment. And so we can only run B5 or B20 as it currently stands, but we're working on some cutting edge technology involving a company called Optimus Technologies. They're based out of Pittsburgh that's working with us to develop a list of vehicles that we can put their retrofit technology on to go to 100% biodiesel, which is a very, very clean fuel and will just turbocharge our carbon dioxide reduction. So I mentioned we're up to 5.5 million, pounds of CO2 reduction in the last 4 years since I've been here. And really since 2018, when we started using biodiesel, that's 90% of our carbon dioxide reduction. So electric, I think, is really sexy right now to talk about, but it's not going to be the solution for a while as far as all types of vehicles that we have to run. And in the meanwhile, B100, that solution in the meanwhile as a bridge to the future. And then another revolution that's happening, obviously, a lot of folks are talking about this, is the autonomous functions that vehicles are starting to do. So that could mean something as simple as when you're driving a newer vehicle nowadays, they have lane change warnings. So they will tell you if you stray into the, across the median, it will warn you with either lights or a noise that you're straying into another lane. What's around the vehicle, using camera technologies or LiDAR technologies, things like that. There's also now a large number of vehicles that will brake automatically if you're about to hit something before the human driver can react and brake the vehicle. And these are all steps towards full autonomous, which is the vehicle drives itself without driver input. And I think that's coming as well. And a lot of companies are working on it. Apple's working on it. Google's working on it. Tesla has probably the most advanced amongst these groups of companies working on it. And it's kind of a race to see who can get there first and do it safely. A lot of my work has been in vehicle safety. So I've seen, investigated, studied a lot of traffic collisions and fatalities and bad injuries in my career. A lot of that's because of human error, whether that's people doing drugs or drinking when they're driving, whether that's people falling asleep, taking medications, over the counter, prescription, whatever, all of that can affect your driving, drowsiness, various medical issues. Humans have a lot of issues when it comes to performing on the road. And a lot of us unfortunately know about this from our own lives, having been involved in traffic collisions. Some of them very bad, some of them causing bad injuries and fatalities. So another thing worth mentioning that if you are in the Madison area is that Madison is now a Vision Zero city. And Vision Zero is a rubric we're working under to eliminate all traffic fatalities on the road by 2030. This involves many departments in the city of Madison. There's a whole committee working on it, and stakeholders outside the city as well, including the university and other government agencies. And the way to do this is through multiple efforts. One is enforcement. One is things like reducing the speed limits on our roadways, which we've started doing here in Madison. The big one is design of streets. Can you design streets to be safer by eliminating certain intersections or turns that are very dangerous, by increasing the amount of time that people have to cross the street, to putting in things like crosswalks and speed bumps strategically around the city in places where we've seen bad traffic collisions, by building more bike lanes that are protected from the road. This has been successful in a large number of places around the world. And Vision Zero actually started in Sweden in 1997, where the country of Sweden says no traffic fatalities on our road are acceptable. And they've seen dramatic progress, along with New York City, where I used to work. She has a more mature Vision Zero plan and has seen a lot of success in this area. And I'm hoping we see the same success here. Mayor Rhodes Conway just announced Vision Zero in 2020. So we're in the early kind of stages.
Having lived abroad for a few years, one thing I am very interested in is replacing four-way stops with roundabouts.
Yes.
And it seems like those are just better in every way. They actually have a climate impact too, because you save fuel by not ever fully stopping. You also slow down traffic. It sort of functions like a speed bump, but Americans just aren't comfortable with them.
Yeah, so there's a lot of data around different kinds of intersections. Roundabouts are huge in other countries, and we have some here in Wisconsin as well. It's another example of an upfront investment. Roundabouts are expensive, but once it's in place, and let's say it lasts for the next 25 years, you'll see a lot of the savings we're talking about. Something else we really need to do as a city and as a society is drive less to places. Just put less vehicle miles on the road, whether that means using Zoom more often. And that's one of the things that's come out of the pandemic. We've learned a lot about working from home and about using Zoom for meetings. Let's take an example of a lot of meetings I go to. It might be 9 people from 9 different places at meeting at one point. And all of us drove an average of 5 miles each way. That's 90 miles right there, right? That's 90 miles of, extra maintenance on the vehicles, the potential for them to crash on the way or get damage that needs to be fixed, the gasoline or diesel that we use. It might be a car that only had one person going to the meeting, so you're not, optimizing the use of that travel, you could say. And I think we've found that instead of taking flights for business meetings or driving somewhere, there might be alternatives using technology. And I think moving forward, now that we're getting over the pandemic, and I hope we're racing ahead of this Delta variant everyone's talking about, the numbers look good in Dane County. And if that continues, I think you'll see a hybrid model that a lot of organizations will use for coming into work in the office twice a week, working from home 3 times a week. That's saving 60% of your fuel if you drive to work, right? And I'm looking forward to seeing better public transit across the country. Something else we're behind other countries in. If you've been to Europe, for example, where they have very good, or New York City, where none of us had cars. My friends and I, none of us ever had to worry about driving and buying insurance and gasoline and things like that. 24/7 subway system, you jump on whenever you need to get wherever you need to go, and then you take it home. Very convenient, very environmentally sustainable. Obviously, we're not as dense as New York City. We don't have probably a chance to make a subway system here, but the bus rapid transit system is in our plans in the city, and looking forward to seeing that work.
Yeah, I think I love hearing you talk about, especially because Steve and I meet in this organization 350 almost exclusively over Zoom. I've never heard anyone categorize the fact that we are all helping a little bit with emissions just from not driving to meetings. And I think or the 3 of us are meeting over Zoom right now.
Right.
I'm so excited to hear about everything that the fleet is doing with electrification and B100. And I am honestly curious to know, obviously, I think there's something to be said about inspiring residents to adapt to using public transportation and also like maybe electrifying their own cars. I'm curious though, you have heard from other fleets from other cities yet, or if you anticipate, because it feels like Madison could be a blueprint for a lot of cities.
Yeah. So I think Madison can definitely be a blueprint, not just in the Midwest, but much further. We're behind when it comes to the East Coast and West Coast. They're further along than us in electrification and the investments that they can make. And some of that's related to the size of their budgets and the communities they're in and the density for as far as penetration of electric vehicles goes. But I think Madison has a good community for this as far as being educated, as far as being aware of environmental sustainability, being aware of how our planet's roasting right now, right? So we're seeing things every year that really should disturb us, that makes me believe that the war is here at our doorstep and we have to really fight. So we're seeing 116-degree days in a place like Portland, Oregon, which is further from the equator than we are, right? And we are seeing their public transit system melt down, literally. The wiring that runs their streetcars literally melted down a few days ago. And in California, there's droughts and there's water shortages and there's record heat waves. You know, my parents live in Fresno, California area, and they report day after day after day after day in the summers that are 108 degrees, 112 degrees. 114 degrees, and it's only increasing in frequency. And that's not even getting into what does it look like in New Delhi, India, where you have 125 degrees and people are dying of heat exhaustion and various other diseases that you're going to get because of this heat wave and the droughts that affect the rest of the economy. So I think it's here and it's now. We have to act now. We can't really wait. And I get frustrated when people make plans for 2050 or 2060. It might be, I think, too late when it comes to that magic 2 degrees Celsius number that a lot of scientists talk about as a tipping point for our society. And then I think about, New York City, that was my home for 16 years. Will it be around, towards the end of my lifetime? Will there still be a New York City? Will there be a Florida, right? As these storms increase in frequency and there's no question hurricanes are gaining strength and frequency because of climate change. So yeah, I don't think it's debatable, but even if you don't believe in it, there's this whole economic argument to make that we need to talk more about. I mentioned Wisconsin biodiesel, Wisconsin companies like Pierce, and other companies in the private sector that can really make a lot of money by tackling this issue and doing it before China comes up with it or India comes up with it or someone in Europe comes up with it. Because what we do here can help the rest of the world. And we are really global. The pandemic showed us that the virus didn't recognize borders, right? And just like that, climate change does not recognize borders. So we can't just say, well, let some other country come up with the answers to this instead of the United States. It really should be the United States because of the resources we have, the education levels we have, the great universities and laboratories and the government agencies we have at the local, state, and federal level. I think we should be the leader in this, and we can be. And I think Madison really should be a part of that. And so that's what I'm hoping to spend my career on while I'm here.
I think that's a great, if not a bit depressing point to end on. We agree. Thank you very much for what you're doing to move us along. We're good to see Madison as a leader.
I appreciate it. And thanks for what you all do. Public information is a big part of what we need. And whether that's the education system, I think starting in elementary school, we need to teach kids what is climate change and what are the effects of it. How does it affect your life, your family's life, your neighborhood's life? I'm often the curmudgeon in a lot of the meetings I go to, or I go to conferences and meetings where everyone talks about how great everything is. And we increased the kilowatt hours of solar we have, or we're using more electric cars. Now I'll come in and say, we're losing, guys. I mean, stop patting yourselves on the back here.
It's not enough.
We're barely going to survive as a humanity. And the United States, which I love and is my home, and I'm a US citizen and everything, we've kind of led the charge towards destroying our planet for the last 150 years. I think we have an obligation to help get us out of this mess.
Agreed.
I think US ingenuity exists to make that happen. We've seen what the tech sector has done in the last 20 years, 25 years. There's no reason why companies like Tesla and other American companies shouldn't lead us out of this mess that, the United States is largely responsible for destroying this planet and should be part of the solution towards cleaning it up. So I'm an optimist at the end of the day, but I'm also an optimist who thinks we're now in the trenches fighting, and it's not something we should stand up, pat ourselves on the back about. I think we need more urgency.
Tech can get us there if politics doesn't hold us back.
If all the stakeholders get our shoulders behind the wheel of this problem, I have no doubt America has the ingenuity and resources to fix this problem. We need the two political parties to get their act together and stop pretending like it's not real. It's their kids and grandkids who are, going to be losers of this. It's another pandemic, really. The climate change, it's killing people, literally. Every time there's a hurricane, people die. Every time there's a drought, people die. Plants die. Animals die around the world, not just here. Other countries, even who you might not consider to be the ones to turn to, like the Chinese Communist Party, they're doing a lot in this area. They do a lot of things I don't like or agree with, but they are investing heavily in electric vehicles, and they're investing heavily in solar panels. And obviously in China, the government, the private sector are tied together a little more closely because of their economic system. But, it would be a shame if we let them beat us. They've already beat us when it comes to high-speed rail. They invested something like $200 billion in a high-speed rail system. It's awesome, works really well. A lot of people use it. We can't even spend a few billion on our high-speed rail system, and it's just languishing. It's a shame. I think it's a shame. We had an opportunity.
We were going to have a link from Madison to Chicago until a certain
Let's build
previous
it.
governor decided to.
Well, it's not too late. What I like to say, it's not too late to plant a tree if you want to plant a tree. Plant it today, and then in 15 years, you might have a tree, right? Ultimately, it's not too late to do something like that. And if I were ever in a decision-making capacity, I would definitely, have a high-speed corridor between Milwaukee, Chicago, Madison, where no one has to drive to these places. It's one road anyway. If you've ever been to Milwaukee in your car or in a bus or whatever, it's one straight road that would be perfect for a rail system. We could be there in 20 minutes and it would be awesome. And we could be back for dinner, whatever other places are doing it. There's no reason we can't here in the Midwest.
All right. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much, Mahanth. Have a great day.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Nice to meet you guys. And keep up the good work that you're doing as well.